entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, have to live in this world every day of being focused on the day-to-day details, being focused on the tactical, but also thinking long-term and thinking strategically about the future of their company. And the 5 lessons we're going to give you today, the 5 leadership skills we're going to talk about, are going to help you make that transition from thinking tactically to thinking strategically and be able to balance those things every day as you run your company. All right, so we've dealt with our technical difficulties. Again, thank you for coming to our GEW event, our GEW presentation. We're going to talk about the 5 leadership skills every entrepreneur must have. I'm Jason LeDuc. I spent 20 years as an officer in the United States Air Force, taking teams all over the world, learning my own leadership skills, building other people to become leaders, to take over and become the next generation of Air Force leaders after I left. What I do in my company is I go into other companies and I teach leadership and strategy. We do workshops, we have online courses, and we take all those leadership lessons I learned from the Air Force, plus the work I've done working with corporate companies and the work I've done with startups, and blend that all together into leadership training and strategy training for the next generation of leaders in the civilian world. This is what you're looking at, Hangar 104 on Peterson Air Force Base. I arrived here in 2007 as a pretty new major in the Air Force. I was taking over as the director of operations of this squadron. If you're not familiar with the Air Force, a director of operations is or operations officer as it's called, is the second in command of a squadron. So there's a squadron commander who gets to do all the good stuff and sometimes has to do the really painful stuff like discipline of the squadron, and the operations officer's job is to keep the squadron running, get the job done, get the mission done, and to start developing the other officers and the other non-commissioned officers into the future leaders of the squadron. That's what I was brought here to do. And this is where, coming in as a major, advancing in my journey as a leader, taking on more responsibility, this is where I really started to learn to think not just tactically, not just at the what's going on at the day-to-day level, but what's going on big picture strategically, and what's going on in the long term. And I bring this up, one, because this is a cool photo, and that's Pikes Peak in the background. It's all, Colorado was beautiful, and I loved working there, and we were doing a very important mission, creating rapid capabilities to go out to the world. But I bring this up because entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, have to live in this world every day of being focused on the day-to-day details, being focused on the tactical, but also thinking long-term and thinking strategically about the future of their company. And the 5 lessons we're going to give you today, the 5 leadership skills we're going to talk about, are going to help you make that transition from thinking tactically to thinking strategically and be able to balance those things every day as you run your company. So let's start off with a question. If you would, please scan the QR code and just type in, what do you think is the most important leadership skill for entrepreneurs? Communication, that's a great one. Give it another minute. Vision. Vision is a great one too. So yes, these are very important skills, and the skills we're going to talk about today wrap those up into it as well. So essential skill number 1, see yourself as a leader. This is something that I see a lot of entrepreneurs and even a lot of folks who are leaders and managers in corporate, they don't see themselves as leaders. They see themselves still doing the job. They still see themselves as still kind of part of the crew, part of the gang, part of the folks around them. And that doesn't mean you're elevating yourself up above everyone, but it means that you are, as a leader, starting to see the strategic big picture, starting to think about the long term, starting to think about how we as a team work together to achieve the bigger goals that we have. So another question for you. Why do we need leaders? Why can't everyone just come to work, be cool, do their job, and it'll all be great? Go ahead and scan the QR code and type in why you think we need leaders. To bring vision to reality, absolutely. To drive the company forward, to lead, absolutely. Absolutely, these are important things. So humans have always looked for leaders, and there are humans who have always risen to become leaders. They've chosen to become leaders. And there's a reason for that. Because way back before there was civilization, when humans were living out in the wild and trying to survive, humans were not the strongest, they weren't the fastest, they didn't have the sharpest teeth, they didn't have the sharpest claws, they didn't have the longest reach. Humans were pretty disadvantaged from all of the other creatures that they interacted with out in nature, except for one fact. They had these really big brains. And so those really big brains started to lead them to, if we work together, we can protect ourselves from these predators. And then those really big brains kicked in again and said, now that we know how to protect ourselves against predators, if we work together, we can outdo these predators, and we can hunt predators, and we can hunt other big game, and we can feed our villages better. We can feed ourselves and take care of each other better. And then, as you see in our picture here, not everybody was great for hunting. There were some older folks, there were some younger folks, not everyone was cut out for hunting. Those folks figured out, if we use these big brains, we can create better weapons that will give longer reach to our hunters. They're sharper, they'll make it easier to kill the game. Now we're working together, not just the folks who are doing the hunting are working together in hunting parties, but the whole village is working on how do we work together to achieve our goals as a village, to keep everybody fed, to keep everybody safe. And then finally, you see in our picture, there's a couple folks from another village trading with the folks from this village, because some villages were good at some things, and some villages had resources that other villages didn't have. And our human big brains figured out, we don't need to do it all ourselves. We can find other humans who are good at other things and have resources that we don't have, and we can trade. And so the point here is that humanity's superpower is not just these big brains, it's the social bonds between people that these big brains allow us to connect. And that lets us build teams. And we build teams to achieve things that we can't achieve on our own. We talked about vision a little bit before. We build these teams to achieve a vision bigger than we can achieve on our own. And we need leaders to lead those teams. That's why it's important as an entrepreneur to start thinking of yourself as a leader. You are leading a team to build something that is bigger than you can achieve on your own. Now, as an entrepreneur, you've set out to have a goal, and early on in the days of entrepreneurs, they often are doing it all themselves. But you hit a limit on what you're able to do by yourself as an entrepreneur, and that's okay. If you're satisfied with where your company is going, with what you can do on your own, a lot of people are, that's great. But if you have a bigger vision, whether that's to make more money, whether that's to help more people, whether that's to have a bigger reach, whether it's to be able to do things beyond your company and increase the types of things you do in the community or the types of companies you run, we need to lead teams to do that so we can achieve something bigger than we can achieve on our own. And the best way and most important way to become a leader is you start seeing yourself as a leader. And I don't mean that in the terms of this, I tell people what to do and they do it. I am the guardian, I am the keeper of the vision, and I keep people on track. I keep people focused, and I find people who believe in the vision and bring them along with me. Essential skill number 2, build trust with others. How well do teams that don't trust each other work? They don't, right? So here's a question for you that you may not have anticipated today. As leaders and as entrepreneurs, why do people follow us? What is it when we bring people along, when we find that person who wants to work for our startup, especially if they're working for little or no pay, why do people follow us? They buy into vision, that's absolutely true. That's an essential component. It's okay, take your time. No, we'll give it one more second. What was your answer? Shout it out.
I said, well, some people buy into our vision, but some people don't know how to lead on their own.
Some people don't know how to lead on their own. It's kind of why we're here today talking about this, right? I mean, we all kind of have an intuitive sense of what it takes to lead, but as we're going to talk about later, there's a lot more to being a leader than just kind of winging it and going by your intuition. So, what you see in the picture here, this is October of 2005. This is a little more than 19 years ago. It's hard to believe. I'm standing in this picture. I'm taking the oath of office because I'm getting promoted to the rank of major in the United States Air Force. I'm squinting because I'm looking directly into the sun. The gentleman in the picture with me is the squadron commander. He's administering the oath of office to me. I'm squinting into the sun because in the military, we don't make the senior ranking officer look directly into the sun. We make the junior ranking officer look wherever he's got to look. So we were looking at the sun that day. It was almost sunset when we were doing this. So that's not what's important about this picture, although that's amusing. What's important about this picture is what happens when you get promoted in the military. Like anything in the military, when you get promoted, there's a bunch of paperwork that goes along with it. One of those pieces of paper that comes along with your promotion is what's called your promotion order. This is the official document that says Jason LeDuc is now a major in the United States Air Force. And what that document says on it, part of what it says, is that the President of the United States, having placed special trust and confidence in the abilities of Jason R. LeDuc, is now promoted to the rank of major. This is why people follow us. They follow us because they trust us. They have confidence in what we're doing. They have confidence in how we're doing it. If we want to be leaders as entrepreneurs, if we want to build that team around us, if we want to have that team not just do what we tell them to do, but take initiative to do things that will excel, to go above and beyond doing the bare minimum, we need to build their trust in us and our trust in them. They wouldn't be here in the first place if they didn't at least have some trust in you as an entrepreneur, as their boss. And this doesn't just go for your employees. This goes for your customers. This goes for your vendors. This goes for your strategic partners. People are following you in your vision because they have placed special trust and confidence in you, just like we do in members of the military when we bring them into the military and when we promote them to a higher grade. Essential skill number 3. Understand motivations. What motivates people? What are some of the things that motivate people? If you've got more than one answer, go ahead and type it in. You can type in as many as you want. Money, absolutely true. Is that it? Are they not going through anymore? Money, vision, meaningful or meaning. Yes, we'll talk about that in a bit. Leader, work, inspiring, all true. As an entrepreneur, as a leader, as someone who sees themselves as a leader now, what we really need to look at is two kinds of motivation. All of the things you talked about fall into one of two categories of motivation. The first is intrinsic motivation. We'll get a little bit of the psychology here. Intrinsic motivation. This is when people do things for the personal satisfaction of it. This is when people do things for the love of the game. The other kind of motivation is extrinsic motivation. This is for some kind of tangible reward, whether that's money, whether that's recognition, whether that's fame, whether that is a trade, whatever it is, that's the I'm doing it so I can get some kind of reward. Everyone is intrinsically and extrinsically motivated to some degree. As leaders, our job for each of the people we are leading is to figure out that balance of how intrinsically motivated they are and how extrinsically motivated they are. This is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Some people live way out on the extremes. Most of us are somewhere in the middle, and we like our jobs, we like to be involved because we get some personal satisfaction, feeling good out of doing it, but we also like to get paid, right? In the military, we used to talk about, wouldn't it be great if everybody were intrinsically motivated? And maybe it would, but we all still took our paychecks, right? And I think a lot of people feel the same way. Yes, I love doing my job, but I still take the paycheck, right? So we want to understand and recognize how people are motivated, that balance between intrinsic and extrinsic, and we also want to recognize them for the great work we do. So that's the first key to recognizing the great work that people do for us, is understanding what that balance is of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that works best with them. Praising people in public is inherently extrinsic, and there are good reasons for doing that. Some of your folks may be more intrinsically focused on their motivation, and they may not want to be recognized in public. Who's ever worked with someone who really didn't want to be recognized in public, didn't want to be brought up on stage and recognized in public? Yeah, everybody knows somebody like that, right? So, awards, bonuses, public recognition, bringing people up on stage, those are all great extrinsic ways to recognize people. Intrinsically motivated people may not want that, but there's a good reason to do that. And you don't need to do it all the time with your intrinsically motivated folks. Sometimes just a thank you is good enough. But it's always good for the rest of your team to see what going above and beyond looks like. If we don't ever recognize people in public for going above and beyond, then the rest of the team doesn't see what going above and beyond looks like. And as leaders, that's our job to show what the standard is, what we expect you to do every day, and when someone goes above and beyond, we want to show this is what above and beyond looks like to me. Whether that is, and that will inspire people to go above and beyond, whether it's because they want the intrinsic rewards or the extrinsic rewards of going above and beyond, or whether it's just because I want to go above and beyond because now I know what above and beyond looks like, and that will satisfy me intrinsically as an employee. High performance should always be recognized and appreciated. In most cases, it should be done in public because we want to know what high performance in our organization looks like, in our startup. Essential skill number 4, learn to embrace conflict. What comes to mind when you hear the word conflict? disagreement, miscommunication. All true. All right, we'll move on. So, the gentleman in the video, his name is Daryl Davis. He had a unique approach to dealing with conflict. We're going to give you a little bit of his story here.
Daryl Davis, the only black man you'll ever find at a KKK rally.
Do you think there's a point where kind of crossing the line and helping their cause?
No. He calls some of the members his friends.
All right, my friend, somebody violated their oath. My end goal is to bring people together. Well, I got to get along with them.
Ku Klux Klan.
Breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. At the end, I thanked him very much for his time. I shook his hand. He wished me luck. He even gave me his clan card. He said, keep in touch. He and then I left. On my way back down the highway to my house, I said to Mary, I said, you know, I rather like Roger Kelly. She said, well, he doesn't like you. I said, yeah, I know. Now understand something. I did not respect what Mr. Kelly had to say. However, I am going to keep in contact with him. I would call him when I had to play a gig up in Frederick, Maryland, or that county. Say, hey man, I'm playing, wherever. Come on out. He'd come. He'd come down to my house. Now, here's a man who did not like me, who felt that he was superior to me. But yet he would sit at my dining room table and eat with me. Or we would go out and have lunch or dinner. So this went on for a couple of years. He began inviting me to his house. And then he began inviting me to Klan rallies.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another and we do different things, it hasn't changed my views about the Klan, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
Over time, that cement that he talked about, that held his ideas together in his mind, began to get cracks in it. He began questioning some of his thinking based upon the conversations that he had with me. And then over more time, that cement crumbled and fell apart. And then a few years back, guess what? Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white men. Sometimes we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I respect him to sit down and listen to him.
Do you think that you had something to do with Roger Kelly leaving the Klan?
Oh, I know I did. It was an exchange of information that made him rethink his ideology.
Daryl Davis.
What do you think? Is there power in embracing conflict? Daryl Davis was able to effect really positive change because he was willing to embrace the conflict and not avoid it. And that's something as leaders and entrepreneurs we need to learn to do. We all come into this with a different tolerance of conflict, with a different ability to deal with conflict, with different ways of dealing with conflict. But in general, most of us don't like conflict. Some people do, but most of us don't. And most people's method of dealing with conflict is to avoid it at all costs. Today we're talking about conflict and how to create healthy conflict, because as we see in the video with Mr. Davis, there is opportunity in conflict to create positive change. So, there are 5 stages of conflict. Who has ever been completely blindsided by someone they're in a relationship with and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a conflict. I see somebody holding 2 hands up. So you know what I'm talking about. So something that's important to understand about conflict is long before the yelling starts, the conflict has started. The first stage of conflict is the latent stage. Many of us are unaware we are in a conflict with someone, and this is where we are when that's the case. We don't know that the conflict's occurring. We don't know that something is bothering that person, whether that's someone we are in a personal relationship with, someone we are in a professional relationship with, someone we may not be in a relationship at all, but that conflict has started long before we even know there's a conflict. Then we start to become aware that the conflict exists. We've all gotten this feeling like, hey, maybe things aren't going as good as they could, right? It's before the yelling starts. It's before the fighting starts. But we're starting to get a sense that there's something going on here. Then there's the felt stage. We start feeling that conflict a little more. That creates stress and anxiety in us, and that contributes to advancing the conflict. Then we get into the manifest stage. This is where the yelling starts. This is where the fighting starts. This is where the real conflict starts, and the insults, the name-calling, the doing and saying things that are not particularly valuable to solving the problem, that's where this can start. 5 stages of conflict, we're just now in stage 4 getting to where it's out in the open and what we would consider the conflict is occurring. And then finally there's the aftermath. And we've all been there where the fighting is over. Hopefully we resolve the conflict. Maybe not, maybe it's going to continue, but that energy has been expended. So the reason we're going through this today is understanding that you may be in a conflict right now and not even know it. You may not be the one who receives the conflict. You may have stuff going on inside you where there's someone who you're in a conflict with that they don't know. So that's one of the takeaways I want you to have today as part of developing your relationship with conflict and healthy conflict is understanding that conflict starts long before the yelling starts, the name calling starts, the recriminations start. It starts before, and if you can become aware in these early stages that a conflict is brewing, you can turn that into a healthy conflict and solve the problem in a much more constructive way. And that's our responsibility as leaders and as entrepreneurs. This is really important because, especially as entrepreneurs starting out, if we've got a small team, we may not be able to afford to take the time to let these conflicts play out and blow up in a big fashion. So when is conflict healthy? There are some times when we want conflict. As we saw with Daryl Davis, he embraced conflict and was able to make positive change. What are some of the circumstances that we can create that conflict can be healthy and improve our business and improve us as leaders? Well, the first is when competing ideas foster creativity. Who's ever been working around a table and there are different ideas and the ideas may be opposed to each other, but as the ideas get presented and the ideas get pitched, we start to see a better way forward. Who's ever been in that situation? Right? When ideas compete, we get to the best ideas quickest, right? When it forces a deeper examination of issues. Sometimes, even as a leader, even as the entrepreneur, even as the person who knows all about the company and everything we're trying to do, sometimes we don't know everything that's going on. Sometimes there are issues we are unaware of or factors in those issues we are unaware of. That conflict can be healthy when someone says, I disagree, I need to talk about it, we have this issue that I don't think you're aware of. One of the great things that healthy conflict can expose to an entrepreneur is that the people on your team may not have a real clear idea of what the goals of the company are, what the goals of the initiative we're doing are, what the goals that you have for them to get their jobs done are, or the policies and standards that they're expected to follow and expect to meet. Sometimes this bubbles up as conflict, and we should embrace this. When someone on our team or one of our strategic partners comes to us and says, I don't understand this, the goal is unclear, yes, it's a conflict, but this can be healthy to getting to more clarity and setting those employees up for success. Shared resources. Every company has them, no matter how big or how small you are. There's always priorities for resources. We see this in a big way in the military because the budgets are so big and it's all political in Congress as they create the budget every year. So there's lots of competition for resources. Having those honest, open conversations, even if people disagree, can make sure we get to the best, most efficient use of resources. And when it drives increased commitment and passion. Remember we talked about that intrinsic motivation? Sometimes healthy conflict can drive people to do things they didn't know they could do, to put in that little extra, to come up with that new idea that's going to make things get really better really fast. And when it forces us to re-examine our values, sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day. Sometimes we get caught up in the process. Sometimes we forget that integrity, if it's one of our values, is important to us, that customer service is important to us. Sometimes we can get so focused on cutting the costs or trying to be efficient, we forget what our values are, or we recognize that it's time maybe we need to re-examine our values and make some changes. So we want to keep conflict healthy. What doesn't work to keep conflict healthy? Forcing opinions, absolutely true. Lack of respect of differing views, for sure. There's a whole list of things that people use to try to strengthen their arguments in a conflict, but most of them actually don't help resolve the conflict or keep the conflict healthy. They actually prolong the conflict and take longer to get to a solution. Here are some of these, right? Who's ever been in a discussion with someone that they disagree with, and they keep saying the same thing, but they just keep saying it louder and louder and louder? Your volume does not change what it is you're saying, and it doesn't change the way people are receiving what you're saying, right? Ridicule and mockery. We see that a lot. We see that a lot in media and politics right now. There's a lot of that going on right now. It's great for 90s stand-up comedy. It's not great for resolving conflict or keeping conflict healthy. So, what are some things that do work to keep our conflicts healthy? Ask questions, I love it. Seek to understand. It's a big one. Just like Daryl Davis, right? Understanding the basis of the conflict. Yeah, what is the root cause of this? Is it a problem with shared resources? Is it a problem with standards? Is it a problem with values? What is the root cause of the conflict? So, there are a number of things we can do to keep conflict healthy. And as leaders, and especially as entrepreneurs, if we're leading a small team or working with our strategic partners, it's on us to try to make sure that we keep this conflict healthy. Here are a bunch of things that we can do to keep that conflict healthy, right? Prepare for the discussion. Everything's always better with a plan, right? Even if you throw out the plan the moment you get in there, having a plan is always better than not having a plan. Staying focused on the value that you're trying to provide and the value that you're trying as a group who's trying to work through the conflict provide, and look for common ground. There are very few occasions where we're so diametrically opposed with someone we're in conflict with that we don't have things we can agree on. Look for those and build on that common ground to try to get to the solution and keep the conflict healthy. Essential skill number 5, delegate, delegate, delegate. A lot of new leaders, I saw it in the Air Force, I see it in entrepreneurs all the time. What is it that keeps people, especially entrepreneurs, from delegating effectively and delegating to their team or their partners? Fear that no one else can do it? Absolutely, that's probably the number one thing. And trust and confidence. We haven't built that trust. Remember, skill number two is building trust in our team, building their trust in us, building our trust in them. Those are two of the primary reasons that leaders in general, and especially entrepreneurs, have in delegating. So why delegate, and how do we delegate effectively? That's what we're kind of here to talk about, right? So why do we delegate? Short answer, remember that idea we talked about as an entrepreneur, yes, we have to pay attention to the day-to-day because our company is growing, we don't have this big staff yet, and we need to make sure things are being done the correct way, the way we believe they should be done. It's our company, we set the standards, we need to make sure they do that. But we also need to be thinking about the strategic big picture. Where is the company going? How are we building strategic partnerships? Where are we trying to take things in the long term? Staying focused on the big picture. If we are always focused on every day-to-day detail, we never have time to start thinking about the big picture and where we want to take things in the future. How we can achieve that goal that's bigger than ourselves. So we need to learn how to teach people what they need to do, teach people their jobs, and then delegate effectively to them so that they understand they are part of a bigger whole, and the way they approach their job and the decisions they make impact the big picture of the company. It just comes down to setting clear expectations and holding people to them. So, a couple of tips when you're delegating. Often when we delegate, we tell people, go do this and get this done. Sometimes we give them a bunch of authority to go get it done, but they don't understand the responsibility they have to get it done. Sometimes we give them a bunch of responsibility, but we don't give them any authority to make decisions on whatever project or task we've given them. And those are the two extremes, right? If we give people a whole bunch of authority without any responsibility, that can lead to abuse. If we give people a bunch of responsibility and no authority to make decisions or to make choices or to go procure the resources they need, that's us micromanaging them. And in a corporate organization, micromanagement is bad. Nobody likes it. As an entrepreneur, if you're micromanaging, it could be leading to the downfall, the decline, and the death of your company. You don't have time as an entrepreneur to be micromanaging everybody. So consider that. When you are delegating to someone, think about how much responsibility you're giving them and give them authority commensurate with that. And it's hard, right? When you're just getting to know someone, you don't know how much you can trust them. You don't know what their judgment's like. So we start by giving increasing amounts of responsibility and authority that go along with that. Goal setting. Setting expectations on people is the same as setting goals. Who likes some of the goal setting systems that are out there? Who's heard of SMART goals? Right? Everybody's heard of SMART goals. You got to remember what all those letters stands for. I'm going to change your life today. I am going to break down to my 3-component goal setting system that I developed based on how we used to do flight testing in the Air Force. All you need to worry about when you are giving someone an expectation or setting a goal for someone else is that it is clear that when you look them in the eye and tell them this is the goal, you can see in their eye when they're nodding, they understand it. And if they don't understand it, they tell you, I don't understand it, and you need to get more clear with them. It's measurable. You have some kind of objective metric that you're going to tell them, you're going to measure them against, and they know that's how they're going to be measured, and you'll know when the goal is done. We don't track metrics just to track metrics. Metrics tell us when we've achieved something and we can move on to the next goal or the next expectation. And finally, it's got to be achievable. And when I say achievable, I don't mean realistic. And this is part of my problem with a lot of the goal setting systems out there. They tell people they need to be realistic goals. I disagree with that. We want to set goals for people. We want to set expectations for people that are high, that yes, it may be hard to achieve, but I want to stretch you. I want to grow you as an individual, and I want to move the ball forward on our mission here and what we're trying to accomplish. So when we're talking about achievable, we're thinking in the realm of physics, in the realm of science, right? Walking on the moon. Very difficult goal for many, many people. We haven't done it in this country in a long, long time. We're the only country who's done it. Very difficult, but achievable. Walking on the surface of the sun, not achievable, no surface to walk on. Got it? Ugh. Also, when you're delegating, remember the 5 W's and an H from school? Who, what, when, where, why, how, all that kind of stuff. When we're delegating to people, again, depending on how much authority we're giving them and how much responsibility we're giving them, we want to avoid telling them how to do things. We want to give them the who, what, when, where, why, but we want to let them figure out the how. And now what's important here is that we need to think about the stakes of what happens if it goes wrong as an entrepreneur, if they don't get it right, if they make mistakes. The way I look at this, when we were doing rapid prototyping in the Air Force, there weren't a lot of stakes. If we made a mistake, it didn't impact a lot of people. However, while I was in the Air Force, and still now today in the Air Force, or actually the Space Force now, we have this nuclear warhead, this nuclear missile mission. This is a mission where it's very important that every procedure is followed exactly. We want to tell people how to do it for a number of reasons. It's highly technical. There are treaties and government directives in place about how we do this and how we handle these things. So we don't want people stepping out on their own and making decisions on how to do things because the stakes are so high in that mission. So as an entrepreneur, when you are delegating to someone, think about the stakes. The stakes are going to determine how tightly you control them, how tight the boxes you're going to put them in, and how much you tell them how you need them to go do what you're asking them to do. And then finally, one of the things I learned in the Air Force, I learned it in that hangar in Colorado Springs with the first picture I showed. We do this thing called vector checks. When we send a young officer off to go do a project or to go take on a task, we don't just send them off and tell them, come back when you're done. We usually tell them, all right, here's what I'm sending you off to do. Take a day or two, go think about how you're going to go do this, and then come back and talk to me. Let's talk about your plan before you go off and do anything. We call that a vector check. Are they on the right vector? Right? We don't know exactly what path they're going to take, but we do know from sitting down and talking to them before they go off and do something if they're going to be on a path that looks like it's going to be successful. And then after we have that initial discussion, we say, great, go off, do good things, have a great day. Let's talk again in about a week and see where you are and see how you're moving along the path and if you think we need to make any adjustments. The important thing when we delegate, and a lot of people, a lot of leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs forget this, is we send people off to do stuff and we never check in with them on how they're doing. When we're delegating to people, we want to make sure they don't feel like they're all alone trying to do this, and that they can't come ask questions, and that they can't look for advice on how to do this project. In the Air Force, we used to call it sending people off alone and unafraid on a mission. We want to make sure we don't do that. When you're delegating, it's important to stay engaged and make sure people are checked in with you as well and understand that you are supporting them in this endeavor. Okay, so as I was putting this presentation together, I couldn't decide on the 5 I wanted to do, so I'm giving you a bonus. We're going to talk about one more essential leadership skill for entrepreneurs, and that's about building future leaders. If you want your company to succeed, you need to start building the future leaders in your company. As you start spending more time focusing on the big picture, growing that company, raising money, building it bigger, going public, whatever it is, wherever this big picture you want to take it is, you're not going to be able to do everything yourself. You're not going to be able to micromanage people. You're not going to be able to be as involved in the day-to-day details. If you want your company to succeed, you've got to start building future leaders. All right, we talked about why it's important to build future leaders in your company. You guys don't need to type that in. So, as we think about building future leaders, it's important for us to understand. Remember, we talked about motivations. We talked about extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. That's great for the idea of recognizing people, but as entrepreneurs, as employers, as leaders, we need to understand what people really want from their employers, from their leaders. It boils down to three things. Universally, survey after survey, for decade after decade, employees say they want to get three things from their workplace. The first is they want their work to have meaning. They want to show up every day knowing they did something that mattered. The second, they want to trust and be trusted. What was essential skill number 2? Build trust with your team. And then the third thing, and a lot of leaders forget about this, a lot of leaders don't even know this, especially entrepreneurs, is that the people who are working for you want to feel like they are being heard, and they want to feel, I see a lot of nods, they want to feel like they're part of the decision-making process. Universally, going back almost 100 years of surveys of employees, this is what people want. It was no different for the baby boomers, from the greatest generation folks. It was no different from the Gen X folks like me. It's no different for the millennials. It's no different for the Gen Zers. And as the alphas come into the workplace, they universally all say these are the three things they're looking for from their employees, and more so from not the people, but the workplace in general. This is how they want to feel when they come to work every day, whether they're coming to a physical location or they're working remotely or some kind of hybrid. These don't happen on their own. These are our responsibilities as leaders. It will not happen on its own. So, 3 tips for you as you start to build your future leaders and you start to provide people in the workplace what they're looking for. We need to engage in that strategic thinking. Remember, we talked about you can't be micromanaging, you can't be focused on all the day-to-day details, because you need to start doing some strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is where we find meaning in what we do as an entrepreneur, right? What is the good we're trying to do in the world? Who is it we're trying to serve? What is it, the change we're trying to make? And doing that strategic thinking is a really critical component of telling the people on our team why their work matters. If we haven't done that strategic thinking, we can't tell people why their work has meaning. And remember, it won't happen on its own. If people don't find meaning in their work, they're going to do the bare minimum, or they're going to go off in a whole bunch of crazy directions that are not going to be helpful. What's really crazy about this, people have been talking about this for decades. Even as recently as last year, only 5% of employees understand what their company's strategy is. And I don't mean like marketing strategy or sales strategy or operations strategy. 5% of employees understand what our company does. What's the good we do in the world? How do we impact people's lives? Only 5% of employees understand that. If you don't understand how you impact people's lives with your company, when you come to work every day, how can you possibly find meaning in what you do? Building trust. We talked about delegation, right? Delegation is how we build trust with our team along with good communication. If we're following the rules we talked about for good delegation to our team, 1, we get a bunch of things off our plate, but we're also building trust with them. We start to trust them more because we've seen they can do what we ask them to do, show initiative, think through a problem, solve a problem for us, and they trust us because we've shown they can take on more responsibility. We've started to place special trust and confidence in them, just like we talked about before. And then developing future leaders is how we bring others into the decision-making process. One of the great things about the military, everything was a discussion about leadership. When we had a 3-star general visiting that hangar way back in 2007, we wanted to make sure that the parking lot got all swept up. There was no debris, no little rocks, no little screws, nothing for the 3-star general to step on. And what we said was, instead of me going out and leading a team to go clean up that parking lot, we found one of our staff sergeants who needed a chance to work on a project We said, go gather a team, go clean up the parking lot. Here's how it should look when you're done. Go forth, do good things. Go figure out how you're going to do it, make your own decisions, but this is what I want it to look like when it's done. These are the kinds of things, this delegating and letting people in on the decision-making process, treating them like leaders, that's how we let them feel like they're part of the decision-making process and feeling heard in the company. Okay, now you have 6 skills that you didn't have when you walked in here today. Seeing yourself as a leader, the most important one, the one that often gets forgotten. Building trust with others. We all intuitively know we need to do this. Hopefully we gave you some steps on how to do this as well as the importance of it today. Understanding motivations, the psychology behind how people like to be recognized and what they're thinking and feeling as they do their jobs every day. Embracing conflict. There's opportunity in conflict. Avoiding conflict usually only prolongs conflict and doesn't get us to those win-win solutions we're looking for. Delegate, delegate, delegate. When I say this in the corporate environment, I say it strongly. For entrepreneurs, I can't emphasize this enough. You will never be able to take your company where you want to take it as an entrepreneur unless you learn to delegate. And it goes back to building trust with others, your employees, your customers, your vendors. And then finally, start building future leaders. As your company grows, you won't be able to do everything on your own. Remember, your employees are looking for meaning in their work. They're looking to trust and be trusted, and they want to be part of the decision-making process and feel heard. If you focus on these 3 things with everyone on your team, or at least the folks you have directly reporting to you, you will start to build future leaders who are going to be able to show up, speak for you, because they understand what the goals of the organization are, the goals of your company are. They're going to be able to make good decisions for you, and they're going to be able to build the future leaders on their team. So as the company grows, you have this amazing roster of future leaders who you can depend on to solve your problems for you. Leadership is a study and a discipline. There's never a day when someone walks up to you and says, congratulations, here's your certificate. You no longer have anything to learn about leadership. One of my favorite sayings is there's no finish lines in leadership. We always need to be training. We always need to be developing our skills. We always need to be talking to our folks. We always need to be understanding what's going on so we can find those opportunities, build our companies even bigger as entrepreneurs, and really make an impact in the world. So the 6 skills we talked about today, they're part of my new online digital program. These are kind of the lofty, big picture, let's be leaders kind of stuff in the course. There are also a lot of very nuts and bolts things about how you go and do things. That's what's in the course. The course is 16 lessons. It's spread out over 16 weeks deliberately because I don't want you all going through every video and every exercise in a day and slamming through this. We've built it very specifically to keep your time watching videos to under 15 minutes each and your time doing exercises to just very short, filling out some questions online that we'll see. We talked about leadership being a study and a discipline. The way we want people to approach this course, and we've built it this way specifically, is we want you to watch the videos and then digest what you've learned in the videos and then go practice them in your company, in your workplace. Then come back, answer the exercise questions. There's also a group coaching component. We have weekly group coaching for this course. Right now it's scheduled for every Monday at 4 Pacific time. For the foreseeable future, that's where it's going to be. We want you to come, ask your questions, talk about how you're using these in your workplace. We want you to come say, hey, I tried that, it didn't work. So we can work with you and do group coaching to help you find a way to make it work. That's why it's spread out. It's designed to minimize the time you spend working on learning and maximize the time you spend practicing these skills you're going to learn in this course. For GEW, for all our folks who came today, we're going to give you a 15% off discount for showing up to this event today. So go in, use the code. If you want to scan the QR code, That's where you can get the course. It'll take you to the landing page where you can get more information on the course, and then click the link to sign up. If you put in the code GEW2024, you will get 15% off the price of the course. My commitment to you for coming here today and thanking you for being here today. This is where you can reach me. I hope this was enlightening. I hope this was helpful to all you entrepreneurs out there. Are there any questions? Enthusiastic applause from the back. Love to hear that. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy your weekend. Remember, GEW is not over. There are a couple more events today, and there's a big event on Sunday that you should all go to. So thank you very much for your time. We'll see you next year at GEW.